I always believed that my life was simple and steady, like an old rocking chair on a quiet porch somewhere in a small American town. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just the sound of wind through the trees and the comfort of knowing exactly who I was and who I loved. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie, and for many years I lived with a gentle peace in my heart, thanks to my husband Daniel and our son Jacob. We were not perfect, but we were close enough for me to feel safe and warm every time I walked into our home. Our house sat on the edge of a wide neighborhood in central Illinois, with big oak trees leaning over the sidewalks and children running around with their bikes until sunset. It was the kind of place where everyone waved even if they did not know your name. For a long time I thought nothing in my world could ever break me or shake me or leave me standing on the edge of something cold and unknown. But life has a way of showing you truths you never asked for, truths you are never ready to hold. And that truth came to me one late afternoon when the sky looked too bright for the kind of pain I was about to feel. Before all of that, though, life felt good. My son Jacob was 27, strong-headed, big-hearted, and always trying to fix the world, even when he could not fix his own distracted thoughts. He worked as a paramedic in town, one of those people who ran toward danger when others ran away. I always felt proud of him, even when he forgot to call, even when he left socks on the kitchen table and smiled like nothing had happened. That boy was my joy. And then there was his fiancée, Lily, a young woman with soft brown hair and eyes that looked like they carried stories she would never say out loud. She came into our lives after Jacob helped her during an accident on the highway. From the moment she stepped into our home, I felt something gentle around her, something almost fragile. She seemed grateful for every small kindness, like she was not used to being treated with care. I welcomed her with open arms, and I tried my best to make her feel like part of our family. I never imagined that one day she would become the center of a storm that would tear my life apart. My husband Daniel was a quiet man, steady and thoughtful. He had worked at the same manufacturing plant for nearly 25 years, and he liked simple things like early morning coffee, fishing on weekends, and reading the newspaper out loud, as if I had not already read it myself. He was not perfect, but after 30 years together, I believed I knew the shape of his heart better than anyone else on this earth. I trusted him with parts of myself. I never shared with another soul. I learned the hard way that trust can break clean in half before you even hear the sound. It all started on what should have been a normal Wednesday. I woke early, made breakfast, and watched the sun rise over the small lake near our home. I had no reason to think that day would become the moment that split my life into a before and an after. I remember folding laundry in the living room, humming to an old Patsy Cline song. I remember stopping only because Jacob called to tell me he was heading to the station for a double shift. He sounded tired and excited at the same time because he and Lily were planning their wedding for the following spring. I felt so happy for them. I remember telling him to drive safe and telling myself that life was good and steady and kind. But life does not warn you when it is about to cut your heart open. It does not whisper a single thing before the storm hits. Late that afternoon, I realized I had not seen Lily all day. She had stopped by the house almost every other morning for the past month to help me plan pieces of the wedding. Sometimes she brought muffins, sometimes she brought nothing except her bright smile. I noticed the quiet that day, but I brushed it aside. I had learned long ago not to worry about small details. I should have listened to that still voice inside me telling me something felt different. As evening rolled in, I remembered that Daniel had left early that morning, saying he needed to check on something at the plant. It struck me suddenly that he had not called all day, which was unusual, but I pushed the thought away. I trusted that man. I believed everything he ever told me. Around 6:30, I needed to take a folder of insurance papers to him because he had asked for them earlier in the week. The plant was only a 10-minute drive down the highway. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and headed out, thinking I would drop off the papers, maybe give him a kiss on the cheek, then stop for groceries on the way home. The world outside felt normal. Birds fluttered along the telephone wires, and the air smelled like spring rain, even though the sky was clear. I drove with the windows slightly open, listening to the steady hum of tires on the road. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing even hinted at what waited for me when I pulled into the parking lot. The lot was mostly empty because the shift had ended. I expected to see Daniel's truck parked near the back, but it was nowhere in sight. For a second I thought maybe he had gone home early. I almost turned back, but something nudged me to stay. Something soft and quiet, like a whisper pressed against my chest. So I walked around the side of the building toward the service entrance where managers often park. That was when I saw it. Daniel's truck, parked in the corner near the small maintenance shed. Parked too close to another car, a silver Honda that I recognized right away. It was Lily's. My heart slowed down, then sped up, then stopped for a moment in a way that made me feel like my feet had left the ground. I stood there for a full minute trying to make sense of what I was seeing, trying to tell myself there must be an innocent reason. Maybe she needed help with something. Maybe they were talking about the wedding. Maybe anything except the thing I feared. But the human heart knows truth long before the mind agrees to it. Something inside me already knew. I walked toward the truck slowly, like I was wading through heavy water. The closer I got, the more my hands began to shake. I could hear faint sounds from inside, muffled voices, movement, a small laugh that did not belong to my husband, and then a second voice that broke me before I even touched the door. Lily. I felt my knees weaken. The world around me blurred. My breath grew thin, like I was trying to inhale through a straw. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to believe my ears were lying to me. But the truth does not soften itself for anyone. It stands firm and cold and uncaring. I reached the truck window and looked inside. That moment shattered everything I knew about my life. What I saw will stay with me forever. And that is where my story truly begins. A story about betrayal, but also a story about finding strength I never knew I had. A story about courage and kindness and holding on to myself when everything else fell apart. A story about how one woman can walk through the fire and come out standing even when her whole world tries to break her. This is only the beginning. I stood there frozen outside that truck, unable to breathe, unable to understand how my world had changed in just a single heartbeat. The windows were fogged and the air around me felt heavy, like the whole sky had dropped onto my shoulders. I felt the kind of pain that moves slow at first and hits you all at once, like a wave that knocks you clean off your feet. I wanted to turn away, yet I could not move. Something deep inside me needed the truth, even if it cut me wide open. Through the fogged glass I saw shapes shifting. Then I heard Lily laugh again, a soft, breathy sound I had never heard from her before. It hit me like a blow. The girl I had welcomed, the girl I cooked for, the girl I held. When she cried, that girl was sitting in a truck with my husband in a way no woman should ever be. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to hold myself together because I could feel something inside tearing loose. I forced myself to tap on the glass. It was a simple, soft sound, yet it carried all the weight of that moment. The movement inside stopped instantly. Silence fell so thick I felt it in my bones. After a moment, the truck door opened and Daniel scrambled out his shirt, half-buttoned, his face full of shock and guilt. He looked at me like he was staring at a ghost, and for a moment we both just stood there in a quiet so painful it felt endless. Maggie, he said, but his voice broke before he could say more. I looked at him, not angry, yet not calm either. It was a deep stillness inside me, the kind you find only when your heart is breaking and there is nothing you can do to stop it. My eyes drifted past him to the truck seat where Lily sat, trying to pull her coat around herself, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She looked so small, so fragile, yet so responsible for the storm crashing through my life. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply said, "Tell me the truth, Daniel." His shoulders slumped and he looked down at the gravel like he hoped the ground would swallow him whole. For a moment he did not answer, and that silence was worse than any confession. It told me everything. Lily stepped out of the truck, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Maggie, I am so sorry. I could hardly look at her." My mind traveled back to every moment she had sat at my kitchen table, every morning she had smiled at me, every time she told me she loved Jacob. I felt sick. I felt betrayed by both of them in ways I had no words for. Why, I asked softly, though my voice felt far away like it belonged to someone else. Neither of them answered. Daniel tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. I felt something inside me rise, not anger exactly, but a kind of strength that held me up when the world tried to pull me apart. I took a slow, deep breath, steadying myself, because I knew if I let my emotions loose right then, I would not survive the moment. I said, "Both of you need to leave now." My voice surprised even me. It was firm, steady, and full of pain, yet clear as day. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but he must have seen something in my eyes because he backed away. Lily stood still, tears running down her face, but I could not find enough softness inside me to comfort her. Not now, not after what I had seen. They drove away, leaving me standing alone beside the empty lot, the sound of the truck engine fading into the distance. As soon as they disappeared, the world around me collapsed. My legs shook and I had to grab the side of the shed to keep from falling. Tears poured down my face, warm and steady and silent. I cried for my marriage. I cried for my son. I cried for the girl I trusted. I cried for the woman I used to be just a few hours earlier. I do not know how long I stood there. Time felt strange, like it was stretching and folding at the same time. Eventually, I gathered the strength to walk back to my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock the door. I sat inside, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing, while my whole world felt like it had cracked down the middle. On the drive home, I kept seeing their faces again and again, Daniel looking guilty, Lily looking scared, both of them looking at me like they wished they could erase what had happened. The pain cut deep, yet beneath that pain, something else slowly began to form, something small but solid, almost like the first spark of fire in a cold, dark room. Strength, the beginning of it, the kind that only arrives when life strips you bare. When I reached home, the sun was almost gone, leaving a soft blue light over the yard. I walked inside, half expecting Daniel to be there waiting, but the house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that sits heavy on your chest. I dropped my... He sat at the table across from me. His shoulders shook as he cried, and I sat beside him, holding him the way a mother holds her grown child when there is no magic strong enough to take away the hurt. I rocked him slowly, just like I had when he was a baby, whispering, "It is all right, let it out, my sweet boy." It took a long time before his sobs quieted. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were red and tired. I made us both tea, though my hands shook so badly it almost spilled. The steam rose softly between us, and the house felt unbearably silent. Jacob looked at me and whispered, "How long, Mom? How long has this been happening?" I shook my head. "I do not know." He rubbed his face with both hands, trying to make sense of something senseless. I could see the anger building beneath his sorrow like a storm beginning to rise. After a long silence, he asked, "Did she say anything? Did Dad?" I told him neither of them gave reasons or explanations, just guilt and fear. That truth only seemed to deepen his pain. He stood again, pacing slow and heavy, like his heart weighed too much for his body. I tried to get through to him. "Jacob, listen to me carefully. This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You loved her with everything you had. I will not let this pain take everything from us." Then I turned off the lights and walked to my room, knowing this was only the beginning of a long, hard journey. I did not know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not let this betrayal destroy us. Not me, not my son, not our future. The next morning arrived slow and heavy, like a gray blanket drifting across the sky. I hardly slept. My eyes felt swollen and my heart felt hollow, yet something inside me kept pushing me forward, urging me to stand up and face whatever the day held. I moved quietly through the house, trying not to wake Jacob, who was still sleeping on the couch. His breathing was soft and uneven, like the weight of his heartbreak still pressed on his chest even in sleep. I walked to the kitchen and stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the yard. The world outside looked peaceful, yet nothing inside me felt the same. I touched the countertop, running my fingers over its familiar surface, thinking of the countless mornings when life felt steady. Now everything felt different, like the ground under my feet had shifted overnight. As I stood there, lost in thought, I heard Jacob stir. He rubbed his eyes, sat up slowly, and looked around like he hoped the pain of yesterday had simply been a bad dream. But the truth settled back over him and his shoulders sagged. I walked over and placed a gentle hand on his back. He leaned into my touch, letting out a tired breath. "We should talk about today," he said softly. I nodded, knowing he was right. This was not a wound that would heal on its own. We had to confront what lay ahead, no matter how hard it felt. Jacob looked at me with eyes still full of hurt. "Do you think Dad will come home today?" I swallowed hard because I honestly did not know. Daniel had always been a man of routine, yet betrayal had twisted everything. I told Jacob, "We will see, but no matter what happens, we will face it together." He nodded, though I could see the worry still clinging to him. He stood and walked to the kitchen table, where he sat down, slowly pressing his hands together. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I think I need to talk to Lily today." His voice cracked slightly, but there was determination in his eyes too. Not to yell, not to hurt her. I just need to hear her tell me why. My heart clenched hearing that. I wanted to protect him from more pain, yet I knew he needed closure. I told him, "If you want to face her, I will stand with you." His gaze softened. "Thank you, Mom. I think I need that." Before we could say more, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway filled the quiet house. My entire body tensed. Jacob stood up quickly, his expression shifting to something sharp and cautious. I walked to the window and looked outside. It was Daniel. He stepped out of the car slowly, with his shoulders slumped and his clothes wrinkled like he had slept inside the vehicle. He looked older, somehow worn and heavy, like guilt had wrapped itself around him all night. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and something deep I could not quite name. Jacob walked to my side, his jaw tight, as he stared at the man who had broken both our hearts. "Do you want to talk to him alone?" Jacob asked softly. I shook my head. "No. We face this as a family, even if it hurts." We opened the door and stepped outside. Daniel looked up and froze when he saw Jacob beside me. For a moment, no one spoke. The morning air felt thick with things unspoken, things too painful to touch. Finally, Daniel took a small step forward, his voice trembling as he said, "Maggie, Jacob, I am so sorry." The words hung in the air, but they felt weak, like they could never cover the depth of the wound he had caused. Jacob crossed his arms over his chest, his expression full of anger and heartbreak. "Sorry does not fix what you did, Dad," he said in a low, steady voice. "I trusted you. You were supposed to protect our family, not tear it apart." Daniel looked down at his feet, ashamed. I know I failed both of you. I failed myself too. I do not expect forgiveness. I just need you to hear me." I took a deep breath. "Then talk, Daniel. Tell us everything. Tell us why." He ran a shaky hand over his face, then leaned against the car like he needed support to stay upright. It was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It started as talking, just talking. I did not even realize how far it had gone until it was too late. Just talking." The phrase stung like a slap. I felt Jacob tense beside me, his breathing picking up. "Talking with your son's fiancée," he said through clenched teeth. "Do you understand how low that is?" Daniel flinched. "I deserve that," he whispered. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you both in the worst way. I cannot explain it without sounding like a fool, but I felt lost, Maggie. I felt like I was slipping away from myself. And Lily, she was dealing with things too. She felt unwanted by her own family, lonely, confused. We leaned on each other and it became something it never should have been." My stomach twisted hearing those words, though a part of me sensed pieces of truth inside them. Pain can twist people into versions of themselves they never meant to become. But that did not make the betrayal any softer or the wound any smaller. Jacob took a step forward, his hands shaking. "You should have talked to Mom or to me or to anyone else in this whole world. But not her, not Lily, not the woman I loved." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I know, son, I know. If I could take it back, I would. Every moment of it. I have been sick with regret since it started. I broke something in all of us, and I do not know how to fix it." I looked at him, steadying myself. "You cannot fix it by wishing, Daniel. You need to take responsibility for the pain you caused. You need to give Jacob space. And you need to give me time." He nodded slowly, his face filled with sorrow. "I will give you whatever you need. I just want you to know that I love you, Maggie. And I love you, Jacob, even if it does not look like it right now. The words felt hollow, yet part of me knew they were true in their own broken way. Love does not always protect people the way it should. Sometimes love can get tangled, twisted, and lost in the middle of fear and weakness. Jacob stepped back, his breaths uneven. Mom, I cannot stay here right now. I need to clear my head. I nodded and touched his arm gently. Go get some air. I will be all right. He walked to his car, moving stiffly like each step hurt. Before he left, he turned to Daniel and said, You broke something in me, Dad. I do not know how long it will take to fix it. Then he drove away, leaving a trail of dust behind him. I stood alone with Daniel, the silence stretching between us like a long road filled with cracks. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. Maggie, please say something. Anything. I swallowed the pain rising in my throat. Daniel, you and I have 30 years behind us, memories good and bad. But what you did shattered my trust. I do not know if it can ever be rebuilt. I need time, I need space, and honestly, I need to find myself again. He nodded, tears sliding down his face. I understand. I will stay with my brother for now. I do not want to make things harder for you. I watched him leave the driveway slowly, his head hung low. The house felt painfully quiet when I stepped back inside. I leaned against the door, letting the weight of the morning settle over me. I felt exhausted, yet somewhere deep within a small flame still burned steady and warm, strength, the kind that rises even through heartbreak. I walked to the kitchen, sat down, and let myself breathe. Today had hurt deeply, but I knew there was more to face. Lily, the girl who had become like a daughter, the girl who had broken my son's heart and mine in the same breath. Jacob needed answers. I needed answers too, and I knew the time to confront her was coming. Soon, very soon. The hours after Daniel left the house felt long and heavy, like the day was dragging its feet through mud. I sat alone for a while, letting the quiet settle over me. The silence felt different now, though not peaceful or comforting. It felt like a space that used to hold my family and now sat half empty, waiting for new truths to fill it. My heart throbbed with a slow, steady ache, yet deep inside something firm kept me standing, a small strength that whispered, keep going. I cleaned the kitchen even though it was already clean. I wiped the counters. I folded the small towel by the sink. I rearranged the salt and pepper shakers. My hands moved because my mind needed something simple, something steady, something that would not break under the weight of everything I had learned. Each movement helped me breathe a little easier. Even as my thoughts circled around Jacob and Daniel and Lily, I knew I needed to speak to Lily, not to fight, not to yell, but to understand. That truth sat heavy inside me like a stone I could not ignore. If I did not talk to her, the questions would eat at me. And Jacob needed answers too. He deserved to know the whole truth from her mouth, not just from mine, but I also knew he was not ready for that conversation yet. His heart was still too raw, too wounded. He needed time to steady himself before facing the girl who shattered him. So I decided I would talk to Lily first, alone. Calm, clear, honest. I grabbed my coat and keys and stepped outside. The air felt cool against my face, carrying the faint scent of early spring. I walked to my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands trembled slightly, but I willed myself to breathe deep and steady. I whispered, You can do this, Maggie. You have to. I drove toward the small apartment complex where Lily lived. The town felt quiet, the streets soft under the morning sun. People walked their dogs, children rode bikes, and life moved forward like nothing had changed. Yet my world felt divided into the before and after of one heartbreaking moment. When I reached the apartment lot, I sat still for a minute, staring at the building. A part of me wanted to turn the car around and go home, pretend that dealing with this could wait another day. But I knew that was not who I was. I had always faced life head-on, even when it scared me, even when it hurt. And today was no different. I stepped out of the car and walked up the stairs, my footsteps slow and steady. When I reached Lily's door, I paused, letting my breath calm. Then I knocked softly. The door opened with a faint creak, and Lily stood there wearing an oversized sweater, her hair tied back in a loose, messy bun. Her eyes were swollen, like she had been crying all night. When she saw me, her face went pale, and she stepped back as though the weight of her guilt pushed her away. "Maggie," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I did not know if you would come." I nodded gently. "I need to talk to you, Lily." She swallowed hard, then stepped aside, letting me into the small living room. The space looked quiet and lonely, like someone had walked through it carrying heavy sorrow and left pieces of it behind. We sat across from each other on separate chairs, though closer than either of us felt comfortable with. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence grew thick with tension, pain, and unspoken truths. Lily looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together like she feared they might fall apart if she let them rest. I finally spoke, my voice steady though soft. "Lily, I am not here to yell. I am not here to hurt you. But I need to understand. Why did this happen?" Her eyes filled instantly with tears. She pressed her hand to her mouth as if trying to block the sob rising in her throat. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "I never meant for any of this to happen, Maggie. I swear I did not. I love Jacob. I still love him. But I was so lost." I watched her carefully, searching her face for honesty. She looked fragile, like a piece of glass that had already broken yet kept trying to hold its shape. I asked gently, "Then why did you turn to Daniel?" She covered her face for a moment, then let out a shaky breath. "I did not have a real family growing up," she said softly. "I moved from place to place. Nobody ever stayed. Nobody ever cared. When Jacob brought me into your home, you treated me with kindness I had never known. But sometimes I felt like I did not deserve it, and I kept waiting for it all to fall apart." I listened quietly, letting her continue. "Then one day, after a small argument with Jacob, I broke down in your kitchen. Daniel walked in. He talked to me. He listened. He understood the fear I carried. I knew it was wrong to lean on him, but I felt so lonely, Maggie, so scared, and he was there." Her voice shook harder as she whispered, "I should have walked away. I know that. I hate myself for not doing it." I felt a sharp sting in my chest hearing her words. It hurt to think of her turning to my husband for comfort, but I also saw something painfully human in her confession. Loneliness can twist people into finding warmth in the wrong places. But it did not excuse the betrayal. It did not soften the wound. I said quietly, "You could have talked to me, Lily. You could have trusted us. You could have trusted Jacob." Her tears flowed faster. I know I should have, but I was terrified. And then everything spiraled and I did not know how to stop it. I took a long, slow breath, letting her words sink into me. The room felt heavy with sorrow and regret. I looked at the young woman before me and saw not just betrayal, but a broken heart, a wounded soul, someone who never learned how to hold love without fearing its loss. But that did not take away what she did to my son. Nothing ever would. I asked her, "Do you plan to tell Jacob the truth yourself, or do you want me to tell him?" Her eyes widened with fear. "I want to tell him," she whispered. "He deserves to hear it from me, but I do not know if he will ever speak to me again." I nodded. "He may not, but you still owe him the truth, and he needs it to move forward with his life." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, her hands shaking. "Maggie, do you hate me?" The question hit me deep. I sat back, breathing carefully. Hate is a strong word, Lily, and strong words have never made my life better. I do not hate you, but I am deeply hurt, and right now I cannot see you the way I used to. Maybe in time I will find room in my heart to forgive you, but that time is not today." Lily sobbed quietly into her hands. I watched her for a long moment, feeling a mix of grief and understanding and disappointment. I felt like a mother would feel toward a child who made a terrible, heartbreaking choice, yet still carried a soul worth saving. When her sobs finally softened, I stood up slowly. Lily looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. I said, "You need to reach out to Jacob when he is ready, not before, and you need to tell him the truth gently and with honesty. No excuses, no hiding." She nodded vigorously. "I will. I promise." I walked toward the door, pausing with my hand on the frame. I looked back at her sitting small and broken in the chair. I whispered softly, "Life gives us choices, Lily, and every choice changes something in us. This one changed everything in my family. Now it is on you to take responsibility for the hurt you caused. That is the first step toward any kind of healing." She nodded again, silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The hallway felt cooler, somehow lighter. I stood there for a moment, letting the air steady my breath. The conversation had drained me, yet also lit something inside me, a deeper strength, a clearer path forward. As I walked to my car, I whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me the strength to face her. Now help me face what comes next," because I knew this journey was far from over. Jacob still needed healing. I held on to that truth because without it I felt like I would crumble. When the doorbell rang, I felt my stomach tighten. I walked to the door thinking maybe Jacob had forgotten something, but then I let him kiss me again. I cannot explain it except to say I was scared and confused and stupid. I was not thinking about Jacob or you or anyone. I was drowning in my own doubt, and I made a terrible mistake. Her breath hitched as she cried harder. I stood very still, letting the truth wash over me like cold water. There was no excuse good enough, but I could hear that she was telling me the full truth, the kind that takes everything out of a person. Lily whispered, "The day you saw us in the truck. I came only to tell Daniel that I could not talk to him anymore. I wanted to end it completely because the guilt was eating me alive. I swear to you, Maggie, I swear I never slept with him. But yes, we did kiss more than once. And yes, I betrayed you. I betrayed your son. I betrayed myself. I know I cannot fix it, but I wanted you to hear the truth from me, not from anyone else." The room felt cold as she finished. I felt tears sting my eyes, not for her, but for all the broken pieces I needed to gather and carry somehow. I walked to the window, letting sunlight warm my shoulders as I tried to breathe through the storm inside me. After a long moment, I turned back to her and said, "Lily, I appreciate your honesty. It does not take away the hurt, but it matters that you told me the truth. And I want you to hear me carefully. I do not hate you. I do not wish you pain, but you cannot stay in this house. You cannot speak to Jacob, not now, not like this. He deserves time to heal. He deserves space to breathe without the weight of this truth crushing him." Her face crumpled and she nodded, understanding completely. She stepped back slowly toward the door like she knew this was the last time she would stand in this house. Before she left, she whispered, "Thank you, Maggie, for everything, for the kindness you still show even now. I am so sorry." I watched her walk away down the driveway, head bowed, shoulders trembling. For a moment I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The truth had been spoken. The wound was open but clean now, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. I closed the door gently, letting the quiet settle once again. I leaned my back against the wood and let a single long breath escape me. I knew healing would not come quickly. I knew more storms were coming, especially when Jacob learned the full truth. But I also knew something important, something steady and strong. I was not broken, not completely, not forever. There was still a fire inside me, small, yet warm and determined to grow, and I promised myself right then that no matter how painful the road ahead might be, I would walk it with courage, with grace, and with the kind of strength that only rises after a heart has been shattered and still chooses to love again. The hours after Lily left felt long and quiet, like the world had gone still just to let me feel every part of my hurt. I walked through the house, slowly touching the walls, taking long breaths and reminding myself that I was still here, still standing, still fighting for the peace my heart deserved. It felt strange to move through the rooms that once held laughter and family moments, knowing that everything had changed in ways I never thought possible. Yet with every step, I felt a little more steady, as if strength was growing inside me, one heartbeat at a time. Later that afternoon, I stood in the kitchen pouring a cup of tea when I heard Jacob's truck pull into the driveway. My heart tightened. This moment had been coming all along, yet I still felt afraid of what it might bring. I set my cup down and rested both hands on the counter, trying to prepare myself for the words I knew I would have to speak, words that would break my son's heart, yet also free him from a future built on lies. The door opened and Jacob stepped in with his shoulders tired from work, yet his eyes soft with the same kindness he had carried since he was a child. He smiled at me, and for a moment I felt the ache of what I was about to take from him. He placed his lunchbox on the table and rubbed his neck like he always did when he was ready to relax after a long shift. "Ma," he said, "you look tired. Everything all right?" I felt my breath catch. I sat slowly in the chair and motioned for him to join me. He frowned slightly, sensing something was wrong. He sat across from me, leaning forward, his eyes searching mine with worry and love. I reached for his hand and held it gently, feeling the warmth of my son, the boy I raised into a good, strong man. The truth rested heavy on my tongue, yet I knew I could not hide it. Not from him, Jacob. I need to tell you something, I said softly. Something that will hurt, but you need to hear it from me. I would not let anyone else tell you. He nodded, his jaw tightening just a little, like he was bracing himself. He squeezed my hand once, a small steadying gesture that nearly broke me. I looked into his eyes and spoke slowly, like each word was a stone I had to lift. I found Lily with your father. For a moment Jacob did not move. His face went still and pale, like all the color had drained out of him. He blinked once, then again, slower this time. His shoulders shook and he whispered, "No. No, ma, no." My heart broke watching him. The pain on his face was deeper than anything I had ever seen in him. He looked like a man whose foundation had just cracked wide open. I stood slowly and walked to him, resting my hand on his back. He turned toward me then and suddenly wrapped his arms around me, holding on so tight I could feel his breath against my shoulder. He shook with silent tears, and I held him like I had when he was small, letting him fall apart in the safety of my arms. After a long time he pulled back, wiping his face with the back of his hand. His voice was rough as he said, "Why would she do that, Ma? Why him? Why my own father?" I looked into his eyes, my own vision blurring. Because they were weak, son. Because neither of them chose honesty in the moments it mattered most. But that is their failure, not yours. You loved her true and you loved her strong. What she did says nothing about your worth. He lowered his head and whispered, "I was going to build a life with her. I was ready, Ma. I thought I had found my future." I touched his cheek, gently guiding his gaze back to me. "You still have a future, Jacob. This moment does not take that from you. It hurts now and it may hurt for a long time, but pain also clears the path for something better, something honest, something that will never ask you to doubt yourself." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Then he asked quietly, "Where is Dad?" I swallowed hard. "He has not come home since it happened. I do not know where he is." Jacob nodded slowly, his eyes dark with hurt and anger. He walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the yard for a long, quiet moment. I stood beside him, letting the silence settle. He finally said, "Ma, you deserved better. I deserved better. And I am done letting anyone treat us like we are less than what we are. I am not going to see Lily again. And I am not going to chase after Dad either. If he wants to leave, then let him leave." His words were steady, strong, and full of the firm clarity that only heartbreak can carve into a person. I reached for his hand again and said, "I am proud of you, Jacob, more than you will ever know." He turned to me and wrapped his arms around me once more, softer this time, but full of love. We stood there in the warm afternoon light, mother and son, holding each other in the middle of our broken world, knowing that somehow we would survive this storm together. When he finally stepped back, he said, "Ma, whatever happens next, we will face it, you and me. We are going to be all right." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was not the painful kind. It was the kind that comes from knowing you raised a good man, a strong man, a kind man. And for the first time since the truth had shattered our lives, I felt something like peace rise inside me, not complete yet real enough to hold on to. The day moved slowly after Jacob learned the truth. He went to his room for a while, and I could hear him walking back and forth like he was trying to outrun the hurt pressing on his heart. I let him have his space because sometimes a person needs silence more than anything. I stayed in the living room, folding and unfolding a blanket on the couch just to keep my hands busy. My mind drifted through memories of our family, the good years, the hard years, and now this painful season that none of us ever asked for. When the sun began to fall low in the sky, the door creaked open and Jacob stepped out looking tired but steadier than before. His eyes were red yet focused, like a man who had decided not to break even when life tried to bend him. He sat beside me on the couch and rested his hands on his knees. "Ma," he said softly, "I am not letting this make me bitter. But I do need time to understand how to move forward." I nodded and gently placed my hand over his. Take all the time you need, son. Healing is slow and it does not follow a straight path. But you are strong enough to walk it. We sat together for a long moment, letting the quiet settle warm and steady between us. Then Jacob asked the question I knew was coming, but was afraid to answer. Are you going to stay with Dad? The air grew heavy. I looked down at my hands and felt a tremble in my chest. The truth was that I did not know the answer yet. My marriage had been built over many years through joy, hard work, and shared life. Yet betrayal had cut it deep, and I was not sure the wound could ever fully close. I said slowly, I am not making any decisions today. My heart needs time too. What he did broke something inside me, and trust is not easy to rebuild. If he wants to come home, he has to show more than words. He has to show change, respect, honesty. And if he cannot do that, then I will walk forward without him. Jacob nodded with quiet understanding. I saw a mix of sadness and strength in his eyes. He did not want to lose his father, yet he also would not ask me to sacrifice my peace for someone who chose disloyalty. It made me proud to see the wisdom growing in him, even through the heartbreak. As night settled, I asked Jacob if he wanted some dinner. He said he was not hungry, so I made a small bowl of soup just for myself. The warm smell filled the kitchen, reminding me of gentler times. I ate slowly, thinking about the woman I was becoming through all of this. A woman who no longer hid her pain. A woman who stood for her dignity. A woman learning to walk through heartbreak with her head held high. Just as I placed my bowl in the sink, I heard a familiar sound outside. A slow, steady rumble of a truck coming up the driveway. My heart dropped. I knew that sound by memory alone. Daniel had finally come home. Jacob heard it too. He stepped out of his room, his eyes sharp and guarded. We both stood near the window as the truck rolled to a stop. The headlights cut through the dusk, showing the shape of a man who looked smaller than I remembered. Daniel sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, like he was trying to gather enough courage to face what he had done. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My hands shook, but I pressed them together to steady myself. Jacob placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch gentle yet strong. Ma, he said, you do not have to talk to him if you are not ready. I took a long, slow breath. I am ready to hear what he has to say, but I will not let his words break me. Not this time. Daniel stepped out of the truck and walked slowly toward the porch. He moved like a man carrying a heavy load on his back. His shoulders hunched, his steps uncertain. When he reached the bottom of the steps, he hesitated before calling my name, Maggie. The sound of his voice brought back years and memories and heartache all at once. I opened the door, but only halfway. I kept my foot behind it as a quiet reminder to myself that I was now choosing the boundary, not him. He looked at me with eyes full of shame. I could see that he had been drinking again, though not heavily. His face was lined with guilt and regret and maybe a bit of fear. He glanced at Jacob, but Jacob stayed still behind me, silent and unshaken like my protector. Daniel cleared his throat, then said, I know I hurt you, both of you, and I know I do not deserve forgiveness. But I need you to hear me. I folded my arms gently across my chest and nodded. Speak. He took a shaky breath. What happened with Lily should never have happened. I do not even know how I let it get that far. I felt old and useless, and she made me feel seen, but that is no excuse. I was weak and foolish, and I betrayed the family I spent my whole life trying to protect. I hurt you, Maggie, the one person who has stood by me through everything, and I hurt our son. I do not expect anything from you. I just needed to say the truth out loud. His voice cracked, and he wiped his face with the back of his hand. The guilt was clear in his eyes. But guilt alone could not fix what had been broken. Jacob stepped forward and spoke calmly yet firmly. Dad, you did more than make a mistake. You destroyed trust. You betrayed Ma. You betrayed me. And I will not pretend that everything is fine. Daniel lowered his head, swallowing hard. I looked at him long and steady. Daniel, do you plan on changing your ways? Or are you here just because you got caught? He raised his eyes, meeting mine with a raw honesty I was not expecting. I am here because I love you, Maggie, and because losing you scared me straight. I want to get help. I want to fix myself. I want to earn back the right to stand in this house again. But I will not rush you. If you want me gone, I will stay gone. A long quiet filled the space between us. I could feel the weight of the next words forming inside me, heavy yet true. I said, I am not ready to let you back into this house, not now, but I am willing to see if you can change. Real change, not promises, not talk, actions. Daniel nodded slowly, like he understood this was more than a condition. It was a lifeline he had to choose to hold with both hands. I took one step forward off the porch and said, if you want to fix this family, then the first thing you do is get help. The second is stay away from this house until I tell you I am ready for a conversation inside these walls. If you respect me, you will follow that. He nodded again, tears slipping down his cheeks. I added, and if you ever betray me again, I will walk away for good and I will not look back. Do you understand? He let out a breath that sounded like a confession and a promise all at once. Yes, Maggie, I understand. I stepped back onto the porch and closed the door gently, not angrily, just firmly. Jacob turned to me with quiet pride in his eyes. Ma, he said softly, you did good. I felt something warm spread through my chest. Peace maybe, strength maybe, healing maybe. For the first time since everything shattered, I felt like I was taking control of my life again, step by steady step. And as the night wrapped around the house, I knew one thing for certain. The next morning arrived slow and gray, with a soft mist drifting over the yard, like the world itself was trying to quiet my troubled heart. I woke early, long before Jacob stirred. Sleep had come in pieces through the night, broken by thoughts of Daniel and memories that tugged tightly against my chest. But even with the ache inside me, I felt a steady strength growing like a small flame refusing to go out. I stood at the kitchen sink looking out the window while the kettle warmed on the stove. The air felt cool and gentle. For a moment the peaceful morning made it hard to believe how much pain had filled these same walls only days before. Yet I knew healing always comes in small silent ways, first long before the louder breakthroughs arrive. When the kettle whistled, I poured my tea and held the warm cup close to my chest, letting the heat sink into my hands. Jacob shuffled into the room a few minutes later, his hair messy from sleep, his eyes tired but calmer than before. He gave me a faint smile, and I returned it, softly thankful for the quiet bond between us. Morning, Ma, he said, his voice still heavy with the weight of everything he was fighting inside. Morning, son, I answered gently. He sat at the table, rubbing his face slowly, then looked at me as if gathering courage. I have been thinking, Ma. I want to take a few days off work. I just need some space to clear my head and figure out what my next steps are. That sounds wise, I said. Time can help you breathe again. There is no rush to decide anything right now. Healing needs patience and gentleness. He nodded, resting his hands on the table. I was wrong about Lily, he whispered sadly. I thought I knew her. I thought she would stand by me. I placed my hand on top of his. Son, people reveal their truth in moments of weakness. She showed who she was, but you also showed who you are. The conversation felt simple and healing, like a reminder that life still held beauty, even when pain tried to swallow it whole. After she left, I felt lighter inside, as if her gentle presence had brushed away some of the fog lingering over my heart. The afternoon passed quietly until Jacob came home from his walk. His steps sounded stronger, more grounded. He sat beside me on the porch and said, Ma, I think I want to start going to the gym again. Get my mind right, my body strong. I need something steady right now. I smiled warmly at him. That is a good idea, son. Strength on the outside can help you steady the strength inside. He nodded, then leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. I watched him and felt proud of the man he was becoming, even through heartbreak. Then out of nowhere, a car slowed on the road and stopped at the end of our driveway. My breath caught when I recognized it. It was Lily's mother. She stepped out with a small purse in her hand, her face drawn with sorrow. Jacob stiffened, and I placed a gentle hand on his arm. Stay seated, son. Let me speak first. She walked up the driveway slowly, each step heavy with guilt she carried for her daughter. When she reached us, she said in a soft, trembling voice, Maggie, Jacob, I am so sorry. I did not raise my daughter to do something like this. I came to ask for your forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. Jacob stayed quiet, though I could feel his anger beneath his calm. I stood and walked a little closer to her. I appreciate your kindness, I said gently, but none of this is your fault. We all walk our own paths, and your daughter must carry the weight of her choices. She wiped her eyes and whispered, she is hurting too, Maggie. I know it does not excuse anything, but she is lost. She misses your kindness more than she misses anything else. I felt a dull ache in my chest. It was not pity, but a kind of sadness for what could have been. I said softly, she needs to find herself before she looks for anyone else. Tell her I wish her healing, but she cannot come here, not now. Her mother nodded with quiet understanding. She whispered, thank you, then turned and walked back to her car, her shoulders shaking. When she drove off, Jacob let out a breath that sounded like he had been holding it for a long time. He looked at me and said, Ma, I do not hate her. I just cannot let her back into my life. You do not have to hate someone to let them go, I said. Sometimes letting go is how you love yourself. He nodded, taking in my words slowly, like they meant more to him than he could say. The sun dipped low, casting a warm, soft glow across the sky. Jacob stood and said, I am going to take a shower, then maybe go out for a drive later. Clear my mind a bit. All right, son, I said. When he went inside, I sat alone on the porch, watching the sky fade into evening. The air felt soft against my skin. A gentle reminder that life keeps moving even when hearts are breaking. And as I sat there, I realized something important, something quiet and steady and true. Healing was not coming in big waves or grand moments. It was coming in small, gentle steps, conversations, hugs, quiet mornings, and hard truths spoken with honesty. It was coming in the strength I found each time I chose not to give up on myself. I closed my eyes and whispered a soft prayer. For peace, for clarity, and for the courage to face the days ahead. Because I knew more choices were coming, choices that would shape the rest of my life. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to heal, ready to grow, ready to step into whatever the future held for me. The next morning, the sunlight spilled gently through the windows, and I felt it touch my shoulders like a quiet promise that life would move forward no matter how broken we had been. Jacob had already left for work. The house felt calm with only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of leaves outside. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, letting the warmth seep into my hands. I thought about the past days, the heartbreak, the truth, the conversations, and the quiet steps toward healing. I realized something as I sat there. Life had been cruel and unkind in ways I never expected, yet even in that cruelty I had found strength. I had faced betrayal from the people I loved most and still stood tall. I had faced my son's heartbreak and guided him with love and honesty, and I had faced the truth from Lily and Daniel without losing myself in the pain. That was courage. That was resilience. That was the quiet power of a woman who refused to let life crush her spirit. By mid-morning, Daniel called. His voice trembled when he said, Maggie, I am getting help. I am seeing a counselor, and I am trying to work on myself. I just wanted you to know I am serious. I nodded, even though he could not see me. Thank you, Daniel, I said. That is the first step. Keep walking the path of change. Not for me, not for Jacob, for yourself. He stayed quiet for a long moment, then whispered, I am sorry for everything. I will prove it one day if you let me. I said softly that would be up to time and actions, not words. After the call, I felt a small lightness in my chest. Change was possible. Healing was possible. Even forgiveness could be possible someday. But more importantly, I had my life, my peace, and my son's love. That was enough to start again. Later that afternoon, Jacob returned home. He walked in with a small smile and a calmer presence than I had seen in days. He came to sit beside me on the couch and said, Ma, I went for a long drive. I thought about everything and tried to breathe. And I think I am ready to start moving forward to... I reached over and squeezed his hand. That is my boy. One day at a time. That is all any of us can ask for. We sat in silence for a while, just letting the quiet wrap around us. The world outside moved on. Birds sang softly. The sky turned gold and then deep orange as the sun sank lower. And inside me I felt a kind of peace I had not known for weeks. Not complete peace, but enough to know I could walk forward. In the days that followed, we slowly rebuilt a new rhythm. Jacob returned to work, but took breaks when he needed them. We cooked meals together. We shared long talks about life and trust and how to protect our hearts while still keeping them open. I forgave myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I forgave Jacob for letting himself be hurt. And though Daniel and Lily remained outside our lives for now, I prayed for their healing too. One morning, as I stood on the porch with a cup of tea, I felt a shift inside me. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it had softened into lessons. Lessons about strength, kindness, courage, and love that endures even when life tries to break you. I realized that I had walked through fire and come out stronger, not because the hurt disappeared, but because I chose to rise anyway. Jacob came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I leaned into him and whispered quietly, "Life will never be perfect, Ma, but we have each other, and that is enough." He smiled, pressing his cheek to mine. "It is enough." I closed my eyes, letting the warm sun and his presence fill me, and in that moment I knew something important. Life would bring challenges. People would hurt us sometimes, even those we love most. But courage was not the absence of pain. It was standing tall in the midst of it. Strength was not the absence of fear. It was walking forward anyway. And love was not perfect. It was steady, constant, resilient, even when hearts were broken. I breathed deeply and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for Jacob, for the strength inside me, for the small light of hope that refused to go out, for the courage to face the future even when it was uncertain. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft gold and pink hues, I felt a warmth rise inside me that I had not felt in a long time. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments of pain, moments of anger and grief. But I had walked through the storm and I was still standing. I had faced betrayal with courage and kindness. I had guided my son through heartbreak. I had seen the truth and chosen honesty over fear. And I knew with certainty that no matter what came next, I would face it with my head held high, my heart steady, and my spirit unbroken. Because I was brave, because I was strong, because I was ready to love again and live fully even in the shadow of what had hurt me. And that was enough. More stories, FR, subscribe my channel.